Hi everyone, Dylan Gowan here. Welcome back to another installment of Overkill Reviews, BangerTV's weekly heavy metal review show. And I'm back in the Banger Bar. It's been a while. I hope you guys are doing well. Just on a quick personal note, I'm super excited to announce that I'll be playing my first show in a year and a half at the legendary Horseshoe Tavern, July 23rd. Really excited about it. I'm just super excited to get behind a kit. So every month we ask our Patreon donors of an album that we should have reviewed that we missed. And here are the results. Here's the record that you guys picked. It's the latest album by the progressive metal band Dvne, called Etemen Ænka, which was released March 19th on Metal Blade Records. Dvne are a progressive metal band from Edinburgh, Scotland, and they've gained a lot of notoriety the past couple of years, especially with their record before Etemen Ænka, Astron, which dealt with a lot of environmental changes. They were kind of inspired by a lot of Hayao Miyazaki films. Just when you thought that prog couldn't get any nerdier, they just go right into the fantasy realm and then take a little page from Gojira of doing the kind of environmental element angle and seeing how humans are just terrible within our surroundings and how crappy we are to the environment. It's a really good, awesome album that you definitely should check out. Actually, Etemen Ænka is the prequel to Astron, so if you haven't listened to this band before, you can really dive into the ongoing story with this album. It's kind of like the episode 1, minus the cringy acting and the Jar Jar Binks. Also, this is Ziltoid, not Jar Jar Binks, and if anyone makes that comparison, you're dead to me. Since these guys are also huge sci-fi nerds, the band is actually named after the Frank Herbert series Dune, and I think that's the reason why they chose to use a V instead of a U to avoid any sort of legal copyright claims. Very clever and also very metal. So everyone I talked to about Dune has really kind of put Etemen Ænka as the forefront of like the prog album this year, and it made me really excited to listen to the album. So you guys picked this record for me to review, and here are my thoughts about it. So what's really intriguing about this album is the story, and it's a little bit long, so bear with me a little bit. The album premise kind of takes place in this futuristic society where humans have discovered this new form of technology that extends human life. And throughout the generations, while this technology had the good and the best intentions, it slowly starts to become hoarded by these upper class oligarchs, and the lower class has no hope, basically. They're kind of living in despair amongst all of these kind of immortal beings. It's funny because that's kind of happening today in terms of you know, social commentary. It's like technology brings us further apart. So this album really is a commentary about social hierarchies and class. And when you have a band that has such a good imagination, it's always difficult to try and balance the story with the music. And sometimes the musicianship can kind of overshadow the story, or the lyrics are really good, but the music's not that great, and vice versa. But Dvne have found the perfect balance of storytelling and music. The start of the album, Enuma Elish, which has this kind of slow buildup, and then it just hits really hard. And it's just so cool. It has this really heavy riff that's followed by this like soaring vocal line, and you have to hear the first little bit of it because it's just absolutely killer. Enuma Elish is kind of like, it's like a play on the Gilgamesh, like the ancient Babylonian myth thing, where it's like, I think these gods were like derived water and they created two. Anyways, that's a whole other discussion for another day. But the song itself is just really well done, and it just grabs your attention immediately, and it kind of has this push-pull feel because the song is about how like the old ways and the new kind of world that you're seeing is kind of clashing each other, and it's like a fight of different ideologies. And ultimately, you have this kind of hypnotic section that kind of ends the song. And it just feels like, oh, that's the moment of where people are realizing that these are the way things are now. They just hit all the right emotions with this song, and that's just the start of the record. Court of the Matriarch is kind of like the perspective of the upper classes, people who used the new technology to kind of ascend to a new phase of human evolution. They call themselves Celestials. It's a prog album, deal with it, it's fun. There's a lot of groove in this track, and it's got this kind of Opeth and Tool vibe, kind of remind me a little bit of Porcelain Heart. Just the tom work is excellent, and it has just like this kind of genre bending stuff that they throw in, and it's just really like cleverly constructed. And the way that you kind of hear the whole album from the start to the end, it's just section after section after section that's all just musically interesting. My two favorite songs on this album have to be Towers and I think Z14, I believe. It's SI in the Roman numeral 14. I think I might have butchered that. I've called it Z14, but you know what? It doesn't matter. The song is great, and as well as Towers. It kind of takes you to the perspective of the more lower classes, how the towers are being built and all these monuments, and people are kind of living in this like utopic-esque setting, and they just feel like they're trying to reach that upper part of society, but it feels like they have no hope and despair. And Dan and Victor, the two vocalists on those two tracks, are just so freaking good at how they deliver the lyrics for those two songs, because you really hear the anger, you hear the despair, you hear the frustration, these just kind of clashes of different stuff that's thrown in, a lot of post-metal elements, doom, prog. I couldn't help but re-listen to those two songs over and over and over again. Loved the 6/8 part in Towers towards the very end, and it's just so freaking awesome. I was headbanging to it the entire time. You gotta check this out. The vocals themselves kind of remind me of Sasha from Intronaut and Braun from Mastodon, how they kind of have this grit to their vocal styles, but they still have this kind of alt-rock vibe to it, and the vocals themselves are just super heavy and guttural. You can kind of make the comparison a little bit to Sasha's growls or Ackerfeld's growls, but it just fits really well within all of the songs, especially on Towers and Z14. Plus, before I even listened to this album, the artwork is fantastic. It kind of reminds me of the 1920s Metropolis poster, how it kind of uses gray, gold, and black. Plus, I already liked this album before I even listened to it, just based on the artwork. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the 1920s Metropolis movie poster, how it has this use of gray, gold, and black, but there's a little bit of decay within the movie poster and the album artwork. It feels like it's kind of this dystopian future for some, and a technical marvel for others. So the negative part I would say would be, you can kind of hear the influences of moments where it kind of reminds you of an Intronaut or Mastodon or Kylesa or the ocean, but I didn't care. I really didn't. I just think that it's more of a homage rather than just a carbon copy, and I think that this album does such a good job of kind of using those types of elements in their own style that despite the easy comparisons that they can make to other bands, I just didn't really care. Despite how many times I listened to this record, I am never bored with it. It is just one of the best albums to come out this year. And I know prog has a little bit of a slow year. I know we're getting some bigger releases in the second half of this year, but this album just freaking is killer. It's just got all the right things, great storytelling, great songwriting, great mix, great artwork. So I feel very confident on giving this album a perfect score. It's a 5 out of 5. It's such a killer record. All right, it's time for shoutouts. Here are a couple of awesome records that came out today. First up, we have Times of Grace, Songs of Loss and Separation, out on Wicked Good Records. Next up, we have, I like this guy, but despite him being super talented, he is incredibly predictable, and that is Yngwie Malmsteen with his new album Parabellum, which came out on Music Theory Records and Mascot Label Group. But I also wanted to take the back half of the shoutouts to recommend a couple of albums that if you're a fan of Dune, you should definitely check out these 3 records. The first recommendation I'm going to give would be Intronaut's Prehistoricisms, which came out, I think, 2008, 2009 on Central Media. Really excellent groove and just sludge and post-metal kind of mixed in. Really, really killer stuff. Next up, we have Kylesa with Ultraviolet, which I believe came around 2010, 2011, out on Season of Mist. And this album I absolutely love, and I continue to listen to it even though it's almost a decade old, and that is Heliocentric by The Ocean, which came out on Pelagic and Metal Blade Records. Excellent, excellent record. And I think that Dune sometimes get compared to The Ocean a lot, and those 2 bands should tour together if they already haven't. So what did you guys think of Etemen Ænka? Let me know in the comment section below. Love to know your skull rating, love to know what interpretations did you make. See you soon.